My name is Wande Osuntokun. I am currently a group lead within clinical project management at Novartis. I have been at Novartis in total for about 8 years. I took a little break from Novartis, went to Takeda for a short stint, and then went back to Novartis. I always feel it's important to talk about the stint. I'm also European co-lead for WOSIP, Women of Color in Pharma. I've been affiliated with WOSIP for about 2 years now. That's sort of my side project. So again, I'm a group lead within clinical project management at Novartis. I work within a group in Novartis called Product Lifecycle Services, and what we do is we support business units across the Novartis organization. So we support Sando, which is the generics arm, we support oncology, we support global medical affairs, we support early clinical development, translational medicine. So it's a very unique group because we're able to work across the whole organization. As I said, from early clinical to full development to oncology to generics. And what we do is we support them in a variety of ways. We support them with running clinical trials, of course. We also support them with niche projects. We support managed access programs. We support transformation activities. Novartis is an incredible organization and at the moment is acquiring a lot of smaller companies and biotechs. So we work within the organization to make sure that those parts of the business that are new sort of get engulfed into the organization in a positive way, because sometimes you can imagine that these smaller companies have their own culture, their own way of working, their own QMS. They come into the big beast that is Novartis, and it's, sometimes we get the opportunity to help those smaller companies settle into life as Novartians. One of the things I really enjoy about my role now, as I said before, is that I get to work across the different business units in the organization. My experience in big pharma is that business units can tend to work in silos. Oncology thinks that they're the bee's knees and that's all that matters, and so does generics, and so everyone else thinks what they do is the most important. And I worked in early clinical development for a long time. That's actually kind of where my experience is and where my passion is. And I also thought the same. I said, what does full development know? If the compounds don't make it through early clinical development, nobody has anything to work with. But in my current role, it is very nice to see across therapeutic areas, across stages of development, have some insight into sort of commercial marketing, it's strategy. I like to be a jack of all trades. I like to think I'm an expert at a couple of things too, and which is why I said early clinical development is sort of my forte, but I do like getting that exposure across industry because I think it's so important to have that. I would say I've been in leadership maybe 7 or 8 years. I'd like to think that I'm an ambitious person and I had a plan of the things I wanted to do. But one of the things that I also enjoy about my role now is people management. I love motivating and engaging others, developing others, helping people reach their full potential. I always say to my team, when you're doing well, I'm doing well. When you're happy, I'm happy. So it's important for me to really understand what people's motivators are and to help them reach their full potential. So as much as I love project work and clinical trials, I have the best of both worlds because I get to oversee people doing that work, but I get to help them be the best that they can be running clinical trials and running clinical projects. Okay, my journey. I'll try to summarize that in the right way. So my undergraduate degree was in psychology and neuroscience. So I knew that I was very passionate about neuroscience, and it was a nice combination with psychology. I did that as an undergraduate degree, a BSc honors degree. I loved every moment of it, and then after that, as most people who have a science degree, I was like, what next? What am I going to do? Am I going to go to medical school? Am I going to do an MSc and then a PhD? I happen to have a good friend that also did a BSc who had an older sister who was a CRA. And this was the first time I'd sort of heard about clinical research, working for the pharmaceutical industry. So I did a bit of investigation and I found out that there was a postgraduate diploma in clinical research. And it was a year full-time. And at the end of the year full time, you got a 3-month placement within pharma. So I thought, okay, this is wonderful. I'd of course done some research after my science degree, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this would have heard the same thing, is that you have a science degree, you speak to companies and they say, well, you don't have any experience. So I decided to commit to this full year program, which was great. We did clinical pharmacology, you did GCP, you did regulations. It was really intense year, but it was great because it gave me the theory in terms of clinical research in the pharmaceutical industry and drug development. And then at the end of that, I got an opportunity to work for a CRO, specifically with their phase 1 unit. So I did that placement for 3 months, and then I was hired on after the placement, which was great. And as part of this postgraduate diploma, they did say something like 95% of people who were interns in organizations got hired. So this was really exciting for me. So I got hired after 3 months. I ended up being at that organization for about 4 years. I learned so much around clinical trials, phase 1 units, phase 1 protocols, and the whole experience of sort of end-to-end of a clinical trial. I got exposure to dosing of volunteers. I got experience with protocol writing, clinical study report writing. I just learned so much. Regulatory submissions, working with ethics committees. It was a really good experience. And I would say if anyone who's starting in this industry has the opportunity to work in a phase 1 unit, I highly recommend it. After a number of years there, I decided to try for an opportunity within pharma, and I was very lucky. I believe in luck, and I also believe in drive and commitment and focus. I applied for a position that was probably way outside of my scope. I did not have enough experience, but I thought, you know what? I believe in sort of connecting with organizations, and they may say, look, you don't have the experience now, but here's what we would recommend for you to do. I think that was sort of my way of connecting within the industry. I got an interview, I met with the organization, it was really great, and they did say, at the time it was a clinical trial leader level 3, they said you're more of a level 1, coming from CRO into industry, but they said, we would like to hire you. We will create a position because we feel that you would be an asset to our organization. So that was kind of the beginning of my career in industry, and that was with Novartis, which is the company I'm with now, which is why I say, I'm very organization proud. I worked as a clinical trial leader for 5 years within the respiratory therapeutic area, and again, running a number of clinical trials within early clinical development. Really enjoyed that, but after 5 years, I felt that I was looking for something a little bit different. I worked on some very sort of high-profile, multinational, multi-faceted clinical trials, and I thought, I think I've done enough here. I need to learn something new. The last clinical trial I worked on at the time was kind of the biggest, most complex, most expensive clinical trial within the respiratory franchise, and one of the key things that we struggled with was around feasibility. What investigators do you work with? What countries do you go in? What are the regulatory environments in some of the countries? In some countries, it might take 6 months to get approval, but after 6 months, your recruitment is through the roof. So I spent a lot of time as a clinical trial leader focused on feasibility and strategy. And I went to my organization and I said, in this business unit we are lacking someone who specifically focuses on feasibility and strategy. Not knowing that I was walking into creating a role for myself, which I did, and I had to be patient. It took 2 years to formalize it, but I then moved into operational strategy management, and I was lucky enough to be able to establish this role and work across therapeutic areas and clinical trial teams around where are the best countries for us to run our studies, where are the patient populations, where are the KOLs, the key opinion leaders. I did that for 2 years. Then, I'm telling you the timeline here, and then something that is very common in the pharmaceutical industry, we went through restructuring and transformations, and unfortunately the location I was in was closed, so I moved to a separate organization where I would say formally went into leadership in terms of people management and really having a voice in terms of clinical study management and what it is we were doing as an organization. I was in that position for kind of a total of 4 years. And then again, transformation, restructuring, I decided that it was probably best for me to move on. I had learned as much as I could. I do have to say that I think transformation within our industry has been such a key aspect in terms of my growth and development, because I've always seen it as an opportunity, even though it's challenging for people. There's redundancies, there's 2Ps, there's all kinds of things, and it's a very stressful time, but I've always seen that as an opportunity to grow and learn, which is why I then moved into my current role, again, in sort of leadership. I've got a team of 8 project managers that I'm responsible for, and sort of, I've said, working on different clinical projects within the organization. Also people management, which is I find really great. I love to interact with people. I love to hear about what people's hopes and dreams are in terms of their role and in terms of their growth, and then work with them to see how we can achieve that. And I'm also very realistic. If we can't achieve it, I'm also very open to say, I think we need to maybe look at something a little bit different. So this is really kind of my focus and drive now, is motivating and engaging others, focusing on that aspect, because I think, we're human beings. If people are happy doing what they're doing and they feel supported not only by their manager but by their organization, they can only do great things. It's a funny thing, as a STEM ambassador, I spoke at a school I think it was in Hampstead, and they were 11-year-olds. And, I told them about what I did for a living, and they were like, okay, this sounds interesting. And I said to them, oh, I play a part in making drugs that make people feel better. And they were like, okay, this sounds very interesting. And one of the little boys said, when I grow up, I want to be, I think he said, a bowel surgeon. And I said, wow, a bowel surgeon, that's very specific. And I said, oh, why do you want to do that? He goes, why? Because I think I can make a lot of money doing that, and I can buy a big house in Hampstead. And I was like, okay, this is really great. I sort of smiled, and I was like, well, make sure you study hard so that you can become that bowel surgeon and buy that big house. And I just thought it was so fascinating that at 11 years old, this is what he was thinking. And, in response to your question around, sort of the finances and compensation, I think it is really important for people to be compensated for the work that they do. I think it is very important, and I've been very sort of focused on this, is to know my value and my worth. So whether it's looking at things like Glassdoor, or even just looking on Google, what does a director in clinical project management earn in the UK? I think it's really important to have these conversations, or to do this research. I also think it's important to have conversations within my network. People are not comfortable talking about money and earning power and potential, but I think we do ourselves a disservice, especially as women. Women are traditionally not known to be good negotiators, and tend to be grateful for whatever compensation package they receive and don't negotiate that. So I feel it's very important for me to do my research and know my worth, so that if I am going in for a job and someone says, here's the package, I can say, well, actually, based on this research, I know that this level earns within this range, and based on my experience, I would like to be at this level. Now, I call that professional maturity. It's come with years, 15 plus years in the industry. It's something that you build with time. But I remember when I first started in the industry, again, I didn't particularly negotiate. I was very grateful for the salary that I received, and figured that this was a great starting point. But I think it comes with time. And I guess the short version is, yes, that my compensation has increased steadily with my progression, as I would expect it to. But I said, I'm really knowing my worth and knowing the value of my contributions to my organization has helped me be confident enough to say, this is what I think I'm worth to the organization. I heard something very interesting at a conference I attended recently. A senior exec in the pharmaceutical industry said, listen, how much your company pays you is by proxy their way of telling you how much they love you. So if your company is not paying you what you feel you're worth, perhaps they don't love you the way you want to be loved, and you may have to go elsewhere to get that love. Top tips, I would definitely say the power of your network is so important. I always say to people, you have to be genuine and authentic with your relationship building, personally and professionally. So when you meet people in whatever workspaces you're in, whether it's in the office or in conferences, it's great to know people that you connect with and to stay in touch. Connect on LinkedIn, meet up regularly. I've met some of my greatest friends through the pharmaceutical industry, so I think that's a very important piece. Stay in touch with people. It's great if you meet at a conference and you disappear for a year and then you find out you want to apply for a job at a company and you think it's okay for you to email someone then. Probably not. Is that keep your relationships going. That's, again, another top tip. Know what your industry is doing. You could be very happy within your existing organization and your role, but pay attention to what's happening. What companies are merging? Who's acquired who? Who's changing their model from an outsource to an in-house? Always keep your CV up to date. Again, even if you're extremely happy in your role, because somebody might contact you and say, hey, I would love to see your CV. Can you send it over to me now? Because there's a role I think I want you to apply for. And also apply for jobs even when you're really happy. I think it's important to keep your interview skills fresh. It's also a great way to network and to build your network and to find out the things that are happening out there. Lessons learned, for me. The industry is very small. My first job in industry was at a CRO in North America, in Canada, where I'm from. I thoroughly enjoyed that job, but I made a decision that I was going to move to London, to the UK for a new adventure. My boss at the time was so disappointed that I was leaving because she was like, you're such a key member of the team. And she was so great. And she said, listen, go and have this life adventure. If it doesn't work out, you come back, you can stay in my house. Your job will be, I will find a job for you. So that was really great. But the whole point of the story is I moved to London, interviewed for a job, got a job. My first trial that I was the clinical trial leader for was at the CRO phase 1 unit that I had left. So if I had left them in a lurch, if I had burnt my bridges, that would have made for a very awkward SIV. So our industry is very small globally. So put your best foot forward, put your best self forward, and know that if you think that you are speaking with an investigator in London, that you could be working with somebody in Singapore who is connected to that investigator. So that is definitely a lesson learned for me through that personal experience. My next steps. I'm at a very interesting point in my career, I would say, because I'm very happy with the work that I'm doing now within my current role, within my current organization. I believe a lot in within role growth and development. Maybe earlier in my career, I was always about like, right, I'm a clinical trial leader 1. When can I be a clinical trial leader 2? When can I be a clinical trial leader 3 or a senior expert or all these type of things? But I think for now, I really am focused on growing within my role. I think there's a lot that I can learn, and I think my role can evolve and expand, and I'm really happy and thankful for that. Another key point for me is, sort of motivating and engaging others is really important to me, whether it's within my team, whether it's mentoring and coaching of others. The talent of the future within the pharmaceutical industry is important to me, ensuring that women are getting exposed to the opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry. Women and people of color is something that I'm very passionate about. I'm working with an organization called Women of Color in Pharma, and it's really important for me to sort of engage and connect with other women of color in pharma to ensure that we are doing outreach within our community to let these young women know that there's opportunities past a science degree. We're all sort of raised to, it's medicine or bust. Is to let them know that you can have a job in regulatory affairs or in quality assurance or in clinical operations or you can become a medical liaison, or there's so many opportunities. So I think that's something that I'm definitely focused on over the next few years. As a result of that, I'm also quite passionate about diversity and inclusion. I think it's so important for us to have diverse and inclusive workspaces. Diversity and inclusion is not just about race or gender. It could be about sexual orientation. It could be about sort of, physical and cognitive abilities. It could be about anything. And I think it's important for workspaces to be diverse and inclusive. So that's also something that I think I would like to explore more in the coming years. So I am very lucky enough to be leading European activities for WOSIP. We had a launch event May 2019, earlier this year, which was very exciting. After working with the organization, which is founded in the US, we were able to have a launch meeting in London in May, and then we had an end of year meeting in November to sort of share what WOSIP has been doing globally in this year and what our specific goals are for Europe in 2020. We're hoping to engage, at the moment we're engaging predominantly with the UK and the London area. In 2020, we want to engage with communities in Switzerland and in France and potentially the Netherlands. We also engaged this year with Copenhagen in Denmark. So I think, there's a lot of activities that we want to do. I keep saying 2020 will be explosive for WOSIP. I think we're really going to take off in Europe. So WOSIP is a great organization, and specifically for WOSIP members, there's a lot of opportunities for members to have access to coaching and professional coaching and mentorship. There's a lot of programming, sort of webinars, podcasts catered to topics like knowing your worth, owning your story, how do I get a seat at the table, how do I investigate further, when is my next promotion. And I think just that piece alone is critical to women's growth and development in the professional space. I think having people who look like you, who have been through your journey, who can tell you that it's okay to try X, Y, or Z, I think it's so important. When you look at the data around women of color within professional environment, it is very clear that women of color are less likely to have mentors, less likely to have promotional opportunities, less likely to even get entry into certain industries. And I think it's really important for organizations like WOSIP to support women to say, hey, let's do some interview prep. Let's work on your CV. Why don't you speak to person X at this company? Because I think they could give you some great insight into the corporate culture. And also look around your existing organization. Are there people, is it a diverse and inclusive organization? It's really important to pick where you work and work in a place that is advocating for you, whether it's as a woman, whether it's as a young person, whether it's a person of color. I think that's really important for people to think about. I talked about my passion for talent of the future. I think, a lot of people that I've come across within the pharmaceutical industry have struggled to get here. Nobody really knew that this was where they wanted to be. And I think if we can sort of say to people, if you're interested in science or if you're interested in bringing medicines to those who need them, the only avenue isn't medicine. There are a plethora of jobs for people to do in order to make an impact and have a contribution to world health. So I think that's very passionate. I think the stuff that you're doing with WeNight is absolutely incredible. And, I can't wait to see more videos and have more people tell their stories. And I think spreading the word is so important. And I'm glad to be doing this.